Tomorrow is Earth Day. The theme this year is Planet versus Plastics. Earth Day, April 22nd, every year. I don't know about you, but I've sometimes felt a little bleh about Earth Day. The refrains are familiar but begin to lose their punch after a while. Reduce, reuse, recycle. Every day is Earth Day. Give a hoot, don't pollute. I might be dating myself with that last one. I feel like I generally try to be smart about behaviors that have larger environmental impacts, but the reality is, come April 22nd, a little guilt is invoked for the things I'm probably doing that are not great for the planet. And then we move on to April 23rd, and I feel slightly better, if for no other reason than we're not talking about it a whole lot. Part of it is probably that the problem is so big. It's hard to wrap my brain around it. Climate change, the whole climate. I remember in middle school learning about climates, and we were taught that climates are different than weather, because while weather describes the day-to-day immediate conditions in a place, climate is the long-term weather pattern established over years and decades and generations, much bigger, less affected by the high or low of one particular day, much more difficult to change. Part of the problem may be that I assume I'm doing the best I can. We, or at least I, have gotten so used to the convenience of so many things. Other people are doing far worse things than I am. My house isn't an industrial production facility spewing pollutants into the air or water. And is this one plastic fork that I throw away really going to have an impact on anything? But I've been paying a bit more attention this year to this Earth Day theme, planet versus plastics. And some things have caught my attention in a new way. There are so many statistics, it's mind-boggling. So much information about where plastics come from and how they have shifted from the invention of what is generally considered to be the first plastic, celluloid, in 1869. Synthetically designed to imitate natural substances being used heavily at the time, like ivory in billiard balls, animal horns and shells, and linen. There just weren't enough animals to go around. And then in 1907, bakelite was invented as an insulating material. And this was the first item that was created that was completely synthetic, no natural ingredients at all. And this material provided the advantages of being heat-resistant and durable, able to be mass-produced, and it could be shaped and formed and molded into nearly anything. Plastic research, production, and use grew exponentially from there, particularly after World War II. It wasn't until the 1970s and 1980s that people started wondering what the long-term effects of plastics might be. And plastic's reputation began to take a hit. But the plastic industry responded by developing and promoting recycling programs, which seemed to then convince many people that plastics are okay as long as you recycle. And that helped for a while. But what we now know is that less than 10% of plastic produced has been recycled. Almost 20% gets incinerated, burned, which creates dangerous pollutants and spews it back out into the environment in a different form. And about 72% of plastics end up in landfills or just laying around for a very, very long time. It eventually gets broken up into smaller and smaller pieces, but it doesn't go away. It's not a natural substance. It was designed to last, and it will. We now know that the best way to deal with plastic is not recycling. The best way to deal with the plastics problem is to not produce it in the first place. There are a lot of facts and figures relating to our use of plastics, such as 1 million plastic bottles are purchased worldwide every minute. 1 million every minute. And that's an outdated statistic from 2022. Up to 5 trillion plastic bags are used in a year, and I suspect that number is growing. It's fascinating to think about the effect on just those two statistics if everyone made a concerted effort to use refillable water bottles and reusable grocery bags. It is estimated that up to 200 million tons of plastic are floating in the oceans, in the deeper waters. There, too, they break down into smaller and smaller pieces, and then fish eat the smaller pieces, and humans eat fish, so guess where the plastic ends up? Plastics have made products cheaper, easier to obtain, lighter, and safer, and there are benefits of this. It would be nearly impossible for humans to function now without the use of plastics. Toys, technology, transportation, even trauma centers all depend on plastic production. The downside, of course, is that it has made it easier and less expensive to buy lots of stuff. Plastic in and of itself is not morally bad or wrong. But the way that humans have come to abuse particularly single-use plastics, cheap clothing, often referred to as fast fashion, which often contains plastic in synthetic materials that are quick to produce, and poorly regulated production is problematic. And there are more personal effects of plastics. They eventually break down into microplastics and nanoplastics, barely visible or invisible to the human eye. And they infiltrate everything from the food we eat to the water we drink to the air we breathe. Microplastics have been found in breast milk. Animals have been found decomposed with no organic remains but the plastic that was in their stomach left behind. Some scientists have begun to call this era of human life the Plasticine era, as a subset of the Anthropocene era, or the age of humans. This isn't just to make a point about the quantity of plastics that are in use at this point in history. This is because plastics are now found in rock. They are part of our ongoing fossil record. Plastics have left an indelible mark on the entirety of human existence. Plastic is literally in the dust of the ground. Our human relationship with plastics is a problem. It's a big problem. It's a dangerous problem. It's a personal problem. It's an existential problem. And it's more than just a use problem. It's a cultural problem, a structural problem, and those are often the most difficult to change. In short, it doesn't sound good. You heard Susan read the text from Genesis 11, the story of the Tower of Babel. The whole earth, the whole population, everyone spoke the same language and moved together to settle in the same place. It was really important to stay together. So important, actually, that they decided to build a city and a tower that reached all the way up to the heavens in order to make a name for themselves. Perhaps to establish and grow their community. Perhaps to understand or clarify their identity. Perhaps they wanted to see if they could reach the heavens to connect more closely with God. We don't know exactly what in the story led the people to want to build this tower, but we know that the primary motivation was that they wanted to stay together, centralize, unify their efforts and their settlement so that they would not be scattered across the whole earth. They are together, and they want to keep it that way. God, however, or the Lord in this text, the divine, the sacred one, comes back down to check out what they're doing, because I guess God couldn't see it well enough from up above. And God determines that if the people are successful with this city and tower and stay together in this way, They will continue to be stuck in their ways, and nothing they plan to do will be beyond them. In the CEB translation, all that they plan to do will be possible for them. They'll be able to achieve all their human-driven desires if they stick together in this way. So, God confuses, stirs up, mixes their language so they will no longer be able to all understand each other. And God scatters the people over the face of the earth, which is exactly the thing the people were trying to avoid. And the city remains unfinished. It doesn't even sound like the plans for that tall tower necessarily ever got started. Traditional understandings of this scripture tend to suggest that the people are being punished, brought back into order, back in line by God. This interpretation suggests that when all of humanity got together, their plans and desires were ill-fated at best and threatening to God at worst. I think there is some wisdom to be found in this interpretation. Certainly when we look at how humanity has gotten together, so to speak, on the production of plastics, it has not led to life-giving results. But I'm not sure what this traditional interpretation says about God. That God is worried about somehow losing control of the universe because all the little people down there are building a big city or a tower? That God is frightened by, or worse, angry about this project and the people who are working on it? That God has emotions that are the same kind of emotions that people have? Nowhere in the text does it give any indication that anger or fear is the root of God's response. God doesn't knock over the tower or crush the city in frustration, although we might. God doesn't send the people out in a way that prevents them from reconnecting. There are no walls built. No people are sent to another planet. No people are stricken with disease or death. But it is interesting to think about what this story says about the people who originally told the story, who originally wrote the story down. This was a way for ancient people to explain how they understood their beginnings, how they understood their relationship to each other and to the sacred, and probably how they understood what was happening to them at that time, whatever it was, by reaching back into an origin story to explain this is how things came to be. You can tell in this story that there's a very clear understanding at that time that people are down here and God is up there in the great expanse above. But I don't think there's an indication in the text that this is a form of punishment. I wonder if we look at it in a different way, what we might see. The people want to build the city and the tower because they hope to stick together and create greatness. And I think that is God's hope for them also. God knows that this will happen best through diversity, through scattering, through naturalizing, like spring bulbs tossed in a meadow, naturalizing the people across the face of the earth, where they will live speaking different languages, with different cultures and traditions, and different geographical environments to generate creativity and innovation and variety of perspective. Not just groups of people, but individuals too are filled with diversity. We see this time and time again in the scriptures. And diversity does not mean permanent separation. And as the biblical narrative goes on, the people continue to experiment and learn about being different and being together. And this tug and pull of diversity and unity continues until now. But as God scatters the people from Babel, as that tower idea does not turn out the way that they thought, in this way, ironically, the people have the potential to be able to do even more than their human-centered plans. What if this is the next step in God's creation? Perhaps God is planting the seeds of a great garden of variety, one that will feed more than just one palate, but will generate possibility and hope for generations to come if it is harvested well. Perhaps God trusts that these people that God created actually do have it in them to learn, to work together across difference, to tackle hard things, to try new ideas, to be tenacious and grow from the dust of the ground into a lush and generative humanity. So, if this love of God for diversity is true, it's a good thing because the world needs it. Just this week alone, I have heard the following news stories related to climate change caused by human endeavors, and I was not hunting for these. These were just things that came into my gambit. The coral reefs off the coast of Australia are undergoing a massive bleaching event. There is catastrophic drought in Zambia, and record-breaking heat in West Africa, and historic rainfall amounts in the United Arab Emirates. If you want to see the Great Salt Lake, you should probably go soon, because estimates are that it may not be around in the next, say, 10 years. And the lilacs are blooming earlier, including the purple ones, and I am completely geographically disoriented in this room, wherever Cedar Street is. The sidewalk by Cedar Street, I see Rue pointing, I trust Rue pointing over here. Purple lilac that's blooming, which is where these are from. Data shows that the lilacs have bloomed about 1 day earlier every 3 years since the 1970s. So in the span of my lifetime, the lilac blooms now come about a half a month earlier. The good news is that humanity has the opportunity and ability to use God's great gift of diversity, God's blessing of creativity and imagination to address all of these problems. The good news is that some of this is already happening. Scientists and activists are using God's gift, God's blessing, to work towards solutions and changes that will allow creation to flourish. The question is, what else? What more? What is our role to play? What is yours? What is mine to do? Will we pay attention? Will we do the hard work of changing habits for a greater cause? I strongly encourage you to take a look at the Earth Day 2024 website, earthday.org, and learn more about the Planet versus Plastics Earth Day campaign. It's not just about tomorrow, the day designated as Earth Day. It's about all of the tomorrows of the past and the present and the future. What if we make a new name for ourselves? Blessed by and aligned with God's vision for this planet, a new name born from the creativity that emerges from God's gift of diversity, a new name that single-use plastics are not needed for a good life, a new name that sees the immense and irreplaceable value in all of God's creation, a new name that cooperatively works with God's creative dust to plant the seeds to grow a new world, natural and true, where all of life can thrive. May it be so.